Okay, so let me start with saying that it's quite an unbelievable occasion when I have a chance, me and my friends here, from Poland and England. One of them is my son. We just a month ago, we would sit around the table in my house, me, my wife, and my children, reading your book, and we being edified by it, seeing that Christians survive in China, in communist China, survived and are going to survive. This is our hope as well. And here I am, standing in front of you. Okay, so hello.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be with you too. And also I hope the message today could be encouraging to our brothers and sisters in Poland.
I'm sure it will. I've got a few questions. And the first one is, why do you think communism is the biggest enemy of the Christian civilization?
I think the fundamental difference, between communism and true Christianity is about freedom and bondage, about truth or lies. For somebody, I think we all experienced the communism, and you, of course, were set free already. And we, the Chinese 1.3 billion people, are still under that brutality. It's such a dramatic difference. For communism, their fundamental goal is to control and, with lies and the belief, in a sense, like the Nazis believe the same thing. Like, if they repeat a lie with 1,000 times, it will become truth. But for Christian, we believe the truth and the gospel of Jesus Christ, and only truth will set you free. And freedom, in that sense, is our fundamental values. So I think that is why I think even after the former Soviet Union and Eastern European communist bloc collapsed in 1989. China is still under this brutal communism and survived to this day, should be regarded as a major threat.
Yeah. Okay. President Trump's administration was the first one to present Russia and the communist China as the biggest enemies of the USA and the free world. Why didn't America see such a threat in those countries before that?
I think I'm very glad, actually, to finally see these Western or free world leaders, such as President Trump, came to this realization, and it took really quite some years. I remembered in 1997 when my family were accepted as refugees into the U.S., and there was a huge debate in the American Congress and American Clinton administration. So the argument was about whether to renew China's so-called PNTR, the permanent normal trade status, that Congress used to have that as a leverage to check on China's human rights and with the trade practice. And at the time, the prevailing kind of argument was, okay, yes, China had bad human rights record, persecution of religious freedom and rule of law. And but the business community, as well as the mainstream, political communities, all kind of advocate for argument that we need more engagement, we need more trade, we need more economic kind of empowerment, and with the hope that a middle class will be raised, and then when the middle class was raised, and then the Chinese middle class will demand for more freedom, more democracy, and more protection of their own basic freedoms. And but more than 20 years later, most of the I met with quite a number of members of Congress who voted at that time for the renewal. Of course, later on, President Clinton even lobbied Congress to give China the WTO status. I think now, in retrospect, many congressional leaders, and certainly now President Trump administration, have publicly acknowledged it is a mistake. Look, this is I think this month's the Economist magazine's cover, why we make it wrong, right? Yeah. It was a wrong assumption based on the underestimate of the evilness, really, of communism in China. And so 20 plus years later, we see China actually not only using and taking advantage of the generous offer by the free world, by really empowering themselves economically, but also it becomes a more aggressive, forceful, assertive world power and threat. And yet the human rights actually, as now everybody acknowledged except the communists themselves, that it's the lowest part, the worst part since the Cultural Revolution. So many politicians in the U.S. have deeply regretted of that vote. And I think that's a great wake-up call that the U.S. administration have finally recognized this. Certainly, Russia is no exception, and it's more aggressive and more bullying to the free world, and destroying the world order of peace.
So at last, some changes for the better.
Sure.
How should the free world react to the murders or even terrorist attacks carried out in Great Britain by Russia?
I have been following, of course, this tragic, event, that this is should serve another real wake-up call. As I'm glad that Prime Minister Theresa May and Foreign Secretary Johnson both made very strong statement. I'm also glad that President Trump's White House and the UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, they all united with Great Britain along with other Western allies, that we need to stand in solidarity to speak in one voice, to say no to this kind of brutal, is in a sense, it's aggression, by using chemical weapons in a free world, and to brutally kill and murder citizens here.
So barbarism, yes.
It's real barbarism. So that shows the kind of real teeth of the Putinism. It's Marxism, communism, and plus really hooliganism.
Modern warfare, yes. Combined.
Yes.
What are the ruling Chinese communists most afraid of?
I think a few years ago, the communist, one of the top security officers, officials, wrote an article detailing the 5 major groups that pose the most to the Chinese communist societies, the communist societies' political threat. And, they listed the house churches, they listed the human rights lawyers, they listed the political dissidents, they listed the petitioners. And, these are regarded as the national security threat. A house church, they want nothing but peaceful worship of God,
Doesn't sound very dangerous.
That's right.
At all.
I think that pose, to Communist, party in China, of course, it's more of a paranoid. I mean, they feel, because this already the large number of Chinese Christians, with over 100 million Chinese Christians now, every Sunday, in defining the Communist Party's kind of order of total control them, they are able to worship, at least worship freely in their heart and in their own homes. And so to the Communist Party, that's intolerable. And of course, to them is regarded as a major political threat. That's why they're pushing again and again to crack down and jailing and arresting and torturing these innocent, peaceful Christians, Catholics, and other peaceful worshippers of other religions. So this is they're most afraid of.
Would it be okay to say, do you think, that they are afraid of the freedom of speech, really?
They do. I mean, look at this week, the so-called China's National People's Congress. It's the equivalent of China's rubber stamped, kind of parliament. They just first voted, among nearly 3,000 parliament members, the delegates, and only 2 said no, and we didn't even know who. This is like to the proposal to remove the term limits of the presidency. And today, I mean Saturday in China, they just approved President Xi Jinping, really essentially crown him as the president for life, and there's no term limit.
What do you think? What do you make of it? I mean, what kind of significance it might have on the future of China?
This is very significant. The last time the one Chinese leader in modern time without kind of was granted or given this kind of tenure for life was Chairman Mao Zedong. Another brutal dictator under whom over 60 million people were killed and died. So before Chairman Mao Zedong, and it was all the emperors. So that's why he's named as Emperor Xi already. And I think it will pose a major grave threat, of course, to the freedom-loving Chinese citizens. And that's why in the past few years under President Xi's first term, we have seen this major deterioration and across the board, and freedom press, and journalists. Chinese regime jailed more journalists than the rest of the world combined, and you could receive a 19-year sentence for forwarding 200 Twitter equivalent messages. And you can, of course, the freedom of religion has been certainly, being in the lowest in the sense of the Cultural Revolution. I mean, we have seen in the past few days, I mean, the kind of a persecution has reached to another level that has not been seen, again, since the Cultural Revolution. The believers' homes were even invaded by the security officers. The officer would even demand to stay at a believer's home in order to watch and prevent the believers to have a midnight worship service.
You mean 24/7? Just
stayed at their home. This is happening right now in Xinjiang. And you have over 2,000 crosses from the rooftop of the church building were forcefully demolished, destroyed, and many churches were even totally leveled and destroyed. So this is happening, still happening now.
What would you warn about the current Polish authorities, which are strengthening strategic partnership and cooperation with the Communist China?
I'm not sure this term strategic partnership, the Polish government, how would they make sense? And I think if only economic, some trade, some engagement, I'm fine with trade and engagement. But we can't trade our conscience. we can't trade our fundamental values.
Absolutely.
And can you imagine, in 1930s, the Nazi Germany, their economic GDP is much kind of prosperous and stronger than today's communist China. Can you imagine the Polish government would make a deal and call, Hitler's Germany as a strategic partner? I think in the end, if the strategic partner means, we are dancing with the wolf and exchanging trade, business with our values, with our beliefs, and with our fundamental, beliefs. It will be rather a strategic blunder. It will be a strategic mistake for centuries, maybe not centuries, but for years to recover. I think the odds of this kind of nurturing another kind of fascist type of communist tiger is going to be too late to regret. So that's my warning.
Let's hope somebody can hear you. I mean, in the authorities, and will take the lesson. What do you think of the Vatican's policy heading towards the acknowledgement of the communist Catholic Church in China?
The Vatican's policy to the communist China, so far I've been following the report about supposed to be imminent announcement between Vatican and Chinese regime for so-called normalization, including the appointment of bishops. And if the Vatican's desire is really to take care of the shape of God and really God's people in China. This kind of rather naive way.
That's a very big if, yes?
Yeah, naive way to build this relationship with communist China when all these things are happening, as I just listed, this the worst human rights record, religious freedom. The Catholic Church has been, as late as last week, were being kind of crosses were being torn down, and with the priests and with the bishops are missing and being locked up. And how would you make that? I think that would be a very serious mistake, and it will be, to many Catholic, who are loyal to the Vatican, to the Pope over the years, who stayed in prison in China, under communism for
betrayal,
40 years, 30 years, and some are still there, and that's certainly a real betrayal.
Let me quote Bishop Peter. It's Fang Jinping. Sorry if it's not from Tangshan, yes, a member of the National People's Congress, who said this week that Catholics should entrust themselves to President Xi Jinping, and quote, "We as citizens of this country should be first the citizens, and only then practice our religion and beliefs." Do you agree with the statement?
Well, this is the type of thing you can see the twisted, totally unbiblical version of a church-state relationship to this guy called bishop, appointed, of course, by the Communist Party, and they are just a kind of a fake religious leader. In essence, they are the communist followers. So this is the way the Communist Party want to be. It's really whether is the head of the church is the King Jesus, or the head of the church is Emperor Xi. So this is the way they want to surrender to President Xi before they surrender to Christ. I think that is the strategic difference. I mean, the way he's seeing that exactly reflect the kind of a mentality he wants to surrender the church and God's people into the total control of this brutal regime.
Allow me to say that as far as I can see it, this attitude is quite contrary to what you and your friends represented when in China, and that's we first serve God and then our authorities. What do you make of the Vatican inviting yet another Chinese delegation to a conference devoted to the issue of organ trafficking? And the Deputy Minister of Health in China said that, let me quote, "The exchanges between China and the Vatican are beneficial for the world peace."
Well, I think if the Vatican is seriously exploring and why, this organ harvesting, is being practiced in China massively, I mean that should be encouraged. And I think the Vatican, instead of just said about world peace, I mean this is about the value of human life. This is about even the death in it. That's the Chinese government has been practicing this, even like live organ harvesting. Yeah. And it's a horrendous practice. And in terms of the organ transplant, and the many news organizations have documented this kind of evil practice. So I would rather to have the Vatican to really raise this as a major issue, and to confront the Chinese regime that what about this? What about this thousands of citizens were missing, and thousands of citizens, even some religious believers, were documented with their organ being harvested to kind of save those privileged people.
Let them deal with the problem. Yes. And the last question: what differences can you see between the Christians and the churches in the free world, in the USA and Great Britain, for example, as opposed to those in the communist China where they are persecuted?
I think the Christians in the free world, including, of course, in the U.S. and in Great Britain, or Chinese Christians are deeply indebted to them, first of all, because of their sacrifice. There's over almost 2 centuries of missionary work, and they shed their blood and shed their sweat in the Chinese soil, and many were martyred even. I think that planted the seed for today's revival in the Chinese church. And on the other hand, after staying, I was exiled in the past 20 years, traveling in the free world and seeing a lot of church shocks instead of cultural shocks. I think one of the major problems is we Christians in the free world are kind of gradually relaxed and kind of taking our freedom for granted. I think that's a key issue, and we are kind of being cornered by all this secularism, even the political atheism, the political correctness. Kind of we, instead of really stand up for the truth and whole truth and nothing but the truth, we're watering down our message. And we are compromising the gospel message, and try to please man rather than God. I think that is the major problem as I see it. I think that's we're almost like retreat, from the word that God created and entrusted us to really declare His sovereignty and His lordship, and instead we're just retreat back to the corner of so-called private practice, and so afraid to hold the truth and into the whole sphere that God has created.
There couldn't be a better ending to our interview with you. I said our because there are a few of us here, and let me say that you are probably the most known Chinese Christian in Poland now.
Thank you.
And it's
and learn a little bit more, maybe Polish culture.
After the conference, we offer some free lessons. Okay, no problem with that. But let me say that you really inspire us And not only the things you do now, you're doing now, but also the things you did in the past. And we know how difficult it was. I mean, we can imagine. We read about it in your book. Can I have a copy of it? And okay, that's the book. Okay, Tajny Agent Boga in Polish.
Thank you.
Okay, you can say the title in Polish.
Yeah.
It says Tajny, which is secret. Tajny.
Tajny.
Agent Boga.
Agent Boga.
Yes.
Tajny
Bóg,
Agent
Bóg,
Boga.
Bóg it's God. And agent is agent.
Agent.
So can you hold it for a while? And I'd like you guys to come here, all of you, Polish guys, and our beautiful flag.
Yeah.
Take the flag, please.
We want a photo. Maybe.
Okay.
Matt, can you take a picture?
I'm just your photographer.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Some patriotic spirit.